Well, it's great to be with you all. I'm so sorry we can't be with each other in person on Sundays or on Wednesday nights and our various activities up here at church, but we're so grateful to God for this technology where we can reach out and stay in contact and in connection with one another. And as long as we're not able to meet, we'll continue to produce these videos every week, just kind of to give us our marching orders every week and just kind of keep us connected with one another. What I want to do today is just give what I hope is a word of encouragement. And I know we can all use a little bit of probably some laughs and a little bit of humor at this time. So I want to start with a funny story, and it does relate to what I want to talk about. But there's a story about a man who went to see a counselor. He's having problems with his marriage. And the counselor said, I think you just maybe need some physical exercise. He said, maybe you just need to kind of clear your mind and relieve some stress. So he said, why don't you go out and run 10 miles a day for 14 days in a row and see if that helps. So the man says, sure, I'll be willing to try anything. So he begins the regimen. He runs 10 miles a day for the 14 days. And after that time's over, the counselor calls him to see how things are going. And the guy says, well, things are going really pretty well. And he says, well, how are things going on the home front? And the guy said, well, how should I know? He says, I'm 140 miles from home. Now, we might feel that way today as well in our times in which we live. Even if we're at home, we might feel like we're 140 miles away. I mean, a lot of us are feeling kind of distant, I think, probably from one another. We're practicing social distancing, but we might feel kind of spiritually and emotionally distant from one another as well. And I want to give us encouragement today that while we may be socially distant and have to be kind of spatially distant from one another, that you and I need to be speaking words of encouragement and affirmation to one another through text, phone calls, through FaceTime, however it is that we can encourage each other. I like the story of Martin Niemöller. Some of you may know about him. He was a former German U-boat captain in the German Navy during World War I. But he became a very well-known Lutheran pastor. And he's most famous because of his resistance of Hitler's policies. And because of that, he ran obviously on a collision course with Adolf Hitler. And so he was arrested in 1937. Not long after he was arrested, his church was bombed. And finally, on February the 7th of 1938, Martin Niemöller was brought before a tribunal for his trial. And as you can imagine, he'd been in prison for some period of time. He was very unnerved. He was uneasy and unsettled about all of this. It was a very difficult situation for him. Actually, he went on to be imprisoned for 7 years in a German prison. He was actually found not guilty of his charges, but he became a personal prisoner of Adolf Hitler. But on February 7th, 1938, as he's being led in for his trial, as he walked through the underground tunnels to the courthouse, he was worrying about his family. He was worrying about his flock. He was worrying about his future. He was unnerved, and as you can imagine, as he climbed the steps to the courthouse, his heart was thumping and his mind was troubled. But then he heard a whisper, and at first he didn't know where it came from, but he soon realized the attending officer, the man leading him into the court, was breathing into his ear the words of Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. And as Niemöller heard those words, that they sent really strength into his soul, and his fears melted away as the truth of that verse strengthened him for the trial of that day, and literally for the 7-year imprisonment he would endure after that. And I love that because many of us today may feel very unnerved and uneasy and unsettled about these times in which we live. And we want to be like that guard, really, if you will, to one another and to people we see, and have a ready word maybe to whisper into one another's ears to give us encouragement in these times in which we live. The author of the book of Hebrews says that we're not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, but we're to encourage one another and do it all the more as the day draws near. Look, we can't gather together right now, but we can still encourage one another, and we need to do that and speak words of hope and words of gospel affirmation and truth to one another. So we may be distant from one another socially, we may be distanced spatially, but you and I can remain close emotionally and spiritually by continuing to speak words of encouragement to one another. I'm so glad our youth is continuing to gather online. I know many of our ABFs are continuing to gather before our services on Sunday morning online to encourage one another and to pray. Tonight, you can get online, and we have a worship night online tonight here from our sanctuary at Faith Bible Church at 7:30. So that's another way to connect with one another and to stay encouraged during this time. And also to continue to join us for our live streams on Sunday. We pray that those will continue to be a source of great encouragement and just a gospel reassurance to all of us in these times in which we live. So again, we may be socially distant. We may be spatially distant from one another, but let's be encouraging one another and be on the lookout for people maybe that we pass on the streets or in a store shopping for groceries that we can be an encouragement to. Let's remember those words that guard whispered into the ears of Martin Niemöller. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. That's a great word to carry us all through these unprecedented times. Well, God bless you, and we'll see you next week.